Well, hello, awesome AP World students. We are so close to the exam, and I'm so proud of you for sticking in there. And so many of you have already joined. I just got to show a couple of these comments on the screen. I don't think Rachel's here yet, but Ethan just wants everybody to know he's in here first. And then Gary got in here second, and NNE was third. So way to go, guys. You guys cracked me up. We've got Jordan here tonight saying hello. All right, Jordan. And Jessica's first time joining the live stream for the first time. That's awesome, Jessica. Welcome to the family, Rachel says. Oh, Rachel was here. Okay, so Rachel did get to see that Ethan was the first one in. You guys are too funny. We got Henry. He's having a bruh moment, okay? And then Wan Ying. Hello, Wan Ying. How you doing? NNE says, heyo. And Wan Ying says, hey back to NNE. We just got all kinds of fun going on in here. We got Joanne. Hey, Josie. Welcome in. And we got Isabella. Man, we are going to have a good time tonight. All right. So we also got Cloudy and Gary and Luz. Madison. Hello, Madison. Welcome in, Madison. And let's see. Gary says, okay, Missy, I figured out outside evidence. You did? What? All right. I'm so excited. And we got Noella. Yes, Noella, welcome in. And Thu is on here somewhere. There he is. And we've got Tammy. All right, Tammy, welcome in, guys. So it is so good to see you guys. Yes, we have a full house. NNE says, yes, full house. Absolutely. So tonight we're going to do it a little bit different. I'm basically going to go over some of the things that were really, really good in your papers and some things that need some work in Unit 6 so that you can see how and what you did wrong, and you can also ask questions. That's kind of what we're going to focus on tonight. Then tomorrow, live at 7, I will be doing final questions and answers. Are you ready for the exam type stuff? So we'll just go over what you need to do for the day of the exam and get you all ready to go. Make sure you don't have any last minute questions, okay? Dead Inside. That's such a sad name. I'm so sorry. About to accept defeat, he says, or she. Don't accept defeat. You can do this, all right? Listen. You can get at least a couple of points, all right? And a couple of points is better than 0, so don't accept defeat. Gary says, I didn't realize that it had to be with the topic sentence, not the document. Oh, I see. Well, Gary, it can be with the document too, but you probably just didn't have enough information, okay? Outside evidence can be with anything, but drop yours in your question, like copy and paste it in the comments and I'll look at it again, or it might show up on what I'm going to go over tonight. All right, so what I did was I grabbed some stuff out of your DBQs and I have it up here on the screen. If you would like to just follow along on the screen, that's fine. If you would rather, you know what? I should have printed this out. I wonder if it'll print out for me. Let me see if I can do that real quick. So if you would rather, split your screen, that's fine. You can do that as well. But I wanted to put it up here for you. You know what? I kind of need my other computer. Oh, well. I want to be able to see your comments as well. Hey, Lana, welcome in. Welcome, welcome. All right. Henry says, during the cram session on Saturday, the teacher said we only need 4 points out of 10 to pass. Is that true? Henry, I am not sure about that because I don't think, at least I have not heard that the College Board has come right out and said what you need to pass. So I'm going to say that I don't know that that's true. As far as I know, I have not seen any rubric that explains that if you get a 8, 9, or 10, it equals a 5 or whatever. I have not seen that. So I don't think that they have advertised that yet. However, 4 points is better than 0. So, you just got to do your best. Hey, Ethan, welcome in. We're about to get started. So this document is down in the description, or you can just look at it as I'm scrolling through it here. Either one is fine. So first we're going to talk about context. And I have some examples of context. What I want to do is read through it with you guys and then kind of get your take. Like, is it good? Does it need some help? Would it get the point? What do you think? So the first part, it says in the and this is for Unit 6, all right? So it's the one that you guys filled out on women's rights and barriers to women's rights, all right? So that's the one we're doing. And if you need to look at the documents again, it's also down in the description. All right, Claudia says, do you add outside evidence as separate? We will get to that in just a little bit. So ask me that question again if I don't address it. Rachel says, the link doesn't work. Oh, no. Well, that's not good. All right, let me drop it over here in the comments. Hold on just a second. Let me see if I can find it. I got so much going on my computer. Let's see. That's not it. All right, let me pull it up here. I think this is it. And I will drop it in for you. Oops. I need that open. Okay, here we go. There you go, Rachel. Try that one. Okay, Gary says, I got the outside evidence this time because the doc was about Muslims talking about all the outside religions living within their lands, basically showing tolerance. Okay, all right. So yeah, your outside evidence, Gary, can go with the document or it can go with your argument. Either one's fine, but you just have to connect it. We said, okay, so you said it's just a theory because the average for the DBQ was only 2.5 last year. Okay, 2.5 out of 7 last year. Yeah. Yeah, it's hard to say what the College Board is going to do because I don't even know if they know yet. They might not even know yet. So just do your best. That's what I say. Well, we got 25 people in here. That's a full class. All right. Make sure and give that thumbs up, guys, while you're in here. Okay. And also, if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure and do that because it really helps this channel out a lot. Okay, let's look at context. So remember our prompt was about barriers to women and what were these barriers to women? To what extent did women have these barriers? Now, remember, when your prompt asks about what extent, which is probably going to do, you need to show that extent by saying it was minimal or it was significant or however you're going to say it. You need to say something along those lines in order to get your thesis. Thesis for Unit 6 was pretty good from the ones that you guys sent me. So, hey, that's good. Like, we're getting the thesis, all right? Oh, it says you need to request access. Oh, my goodness. I'm sorry, Claire. All right, let me fix that. I'm so sorry. Where did I put it? There it is. All right, share. Okay, you're watching me, right? Anyone with the link. Oh, it says restricted. No, anyone with the link. Okay. Anyone with the link, copy link. All right, I'm going to try it one more time and see if this one works. Here we go. Try that link. And if that doesn't work, then you're just going to have to watch on the screen. Wan Yang, don't even put that out in the universe, lady. Don't even put it out in the universe, okay? You have worked hard. All of you guys have worked really hard this year, and I'm going to be proud of you no matter what score you get. All right, let's hop in here to context. It says, in the 1750s, the Industrial Revolution was a turning for many major societies, especially in Europe, where it began. It led to a major shift in the economy from farming and small-based textile making to factories and assembly lines where people would make clothing at a more efficient rate. With the Industrial Revolution also came the Enlightenment. This was a period of time where the thinkers in society began to revolt against common ideas, such as the ideas that the world works as religion states it. People began to make new ideas, such as natural rights by John Locke, which said that everyone is born with unalienable rights, life, liberty, and property. With an idea like this, of course, everyone had to be considered, but women were not. Okay, what do you guys think? Would this get the point? Let's critique it. Would this get the context point for Unit 6 DBQ that we just wrote about barriers to women's rights? What do you guys think? Oh, good. The link works. All right. Sweet. Should I play the Jeopardy song? Do, 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 do. What do you guys think? Cloudy says, I don't know. All right. Outside or context. Does it have some specifics in it, like 2 to 3 specifics? Does it have that? Rachel says she feels like it would. Isabella says yes, question mark. Lou says yes. Tammy says yes. Okay, let me tell you what I like about this. I love the specifics. I love how it talks about the shift and societies and like when I'm talking about specifics, like I'm talking about John Locke, that's specific, unalienable rights. I'm talking about factories, assembly lines. Okay, so that's all really, really good. My problem, though, is which comes first, Industrial Revolution or the Enlightenment? Now, here's the other thing. I do not know that the readers are going to be this picky, but I wanted to address this just in case they are this picky. See this sentence right here where it says, with Industrial Revolution also came Enlightenment? Is that true? The way that that's worded makes it sound like the Enlightenment comes after the Industrial Revolution, right? So make sure that you're very careful when you're writing your context that you put it in chronological order. Because if this person would have started with the Enlightenment and then went to how the Industrial Revolution was involved, that would have pulled it in more, right? And that would have like put it in chronological order. And then I can see why this person put Enlightenment last, because this transition sentence goes more with Enlightenment, right? But find some way to pull in the Industrial Revolution. How are we going to pull in the Industrial Revolution with the Enlightenment? Well, we can talk about during the Industrial Revolution, these Enlightenment ideals were not really followed, right? Because people didn't really have a lot of rights and they were working these hard labor positions. So you can kind of transition it in that way. Now, here's the deal. I think this would probably still get the point, but it's going to depend on who reads it and how picky they are this year. And I don't know that until we start grading the test. So, if you have something like this, you still have a good shot of getting the context point. I just wanted to address it with you guys so that you could see that example. All right, here's another example. Claudia says he's taking a long, deep breath right now. That's probably a good thing. Now, remember, when I grade your DBQs and when I talk about it, I am being very strict and very tough on grading. I'm hoping this year that they're not that tough. I'm hoping that it's not that subjective, but it just depends, right? And it just depends on how they're going to grade it. So if you write it to be picky, then you have a better chance of getting a better score. All right, so that's why we're doing it this way. Okay, next context says, in the turn of the 18th century, Enlightenment ideals began to develop and spread across Europe and eventually to the rest of the world. Prior to this, the Protestant Reformation and the Scientific Revolution had spurred ideas that questioned the legitimacy of the church and brought new ideas about the government. During the Enlightenment, philosophical thinkers such as John Locke began to advocate for unalienable human rights as well as social contract, and economists such as Adam Smith came up with the idea of capitalism. Can you tell that this person knows what they're talking about? Yes. And that's what the readers are going to be looking for in your papers. So this is starting out very good. These Enlightenment ideals, which used reason and logic to examine the need for more rights to individuals, inspired feminism. There's the connection to the prompt. Very good. While women had previously accepted the idea that they were inferior to men, the 18th century saw the beginning of advocacy for more women's rights in government, industry, and society. That's another tie-in to your thesis. Very important that you do that. You will not get the context point without that. Okay, and then it says, what's underlined is the thesis. It says, although many individuals and organizations began to advocate for women's education and equal opportunities and rights as men, women have been denied political involvement and even inferior employment opportunities and working conditions compared to their male counterparts. So one thing I want you to notice about this thesis, this is super important, all right? This person wrote what they are going to write about. This could be paragraph 1. This is paragraph 2. And this is paragraph 3. For the most part, when I read your DBQs this time, everybody had that in their thesis. But remember, you have to have what you're going to talk about in your thesis. So that is a very good thesis. And like I said, for the most part, everybody got that point this time. So, hey, we're learning something. All right. Okay. Then it says, therefore, women have faced substantial barriers for more equal treatment in the modern era. Boom. Mic drop. This is really good because not only does this person tie their context in with their thesis right here, and they put in all the stuff that they're going to talk about within their paragraphs right here, they also address the part of the prompt that says, hey, to what extent? That's important, all right, because they're going to be looking for that, and most likely your DBQ is going to be worded that way. Now, the only thing about this that may not get the complexity point is whether or not they talk about similarities and differences, change in continuity, all that stuff. But here's the thing about complexity. If you get a 9 out of 10 versus a 10 out of 10, it's probably not going to be any different. I find it very hard to believe that a 9 out of 10 would be a 4 and a 10 out of 10 would be a 5. I don't think they're going to do that. Granted, we don't know yet. We don't know. So I could be wrong. I could definitely be wrong. But I don't think it's going to be that difficult, okay? So I wouldn't worry about that complexity point. I think this is fantastic how it's written. I love the context, and I love how it ties it in. Thu says, wow, this is an amazing thesis. Yes, it's very well written. Now, does this get a point versus someone else who doesn't write it as eloquently? Not necessarily. It doesn't have to be written this eloquently to get the point, but your information needs to be in there. So like I was talking to you about this right here, and then also the part about the extent part. Okay, that's really important. Make sure that you have that in there. So this one definitely gets thesis and context, super good information. The context, you could probably even take a little bit of this out and still get the point. But if you've got time, then write it like that. All right, let's look at this next one. Okay, Gary says, you're probably not wrong. In our Discord, people have barely begun writing DBQs. You mean they're not even practicing? That's crazy. That's crazy. Practice makes perfect. And I'll tell you that's true because all of you guys who have been sending me your DBQs, I have seen improvement in them. So practice definitely helps. All right, let's look at this one. Traditionally, men and women had completely different gender roles, and subsequently, men and women were viewed differently in religion and philosophies. That's good. It's very vague, though, so we need to make sure that the next couple of sentences zero in on some specifics. Then it says, society naturally gave more important roles to men and minor domestic roles to women because they thought only men were capable of completing such tasks. Such ideas were challenged during the Age of Enlightenment, where several people believed men and women would have equal rights, and the revolutions in the 19th century also created the rise of feminist movements that argued for equal rights among men and women. Going into the 20th century, women's roles expanded when men went out to war during World War I, and some even participated in war. With such events, women's desire to expand their rights, start participating in political activities, rapidly grew, but their efforts often faced barriers. What do we think about this one? Would it get the point on context? And I think this last part, let me highlight it. I think this is the thesis. Do you think that would get the thesis point? Is it enough? Dead Inside says, it's me, I'm people. Listen, what's your real name? Because I can't call you Dead Inside. That's just too sad. I don't like it. It's too sad. Hey, Tuan, welcome in. So Wan Ying says, no, but she's got a question mark. She's not sure. Sana says, is there a thesis here? That's a good question. Gary says, some people split the paragraphs. True. I think it would, but the thesis is a little weak. Okay. So I think that this context is not bad. It's not bad. The only thing that I would maybe suggest, it's kind of like, you're going to the 20th century and then all of a sudden they're going to their thesis. You need some transitions there that kind of tie it in. Like, with such events, women's desire to expand their rights and start participating in political activities rapidly grew, but their efforts often face barriers. So I'll have to check. I can't remember which paper I got this from, but they might have written another thesis. This could be their transition sentence. And if that is their transition sentence, then it would probably be okay. The other thing, though, that I want to point out is they've got some good specifics in here, but they also have some that they could beef up a little bit. For example, such ideas were challenged by several people. Could you just say, such ideas were challenged by philosophical thinkers? One of them was John Locke. You could beef it up a little bit by like giving specifics in there. And that's where your one pager is really going to come in handy. So if this is the thesis, it wouldn't get the point, but it could be their transition sentence now that I'm thinking about it. And if it's their transition sentence, then it's possible that they would get the point for thesis later on. But this isn't bad as far as context. You could beef it up a little bit more with a couple more specifics. Okay. All right, Ashley, that's what I'll be calling you now. Anani says, what are two context terms? I see enlightenment, but since the exam doesn't go past the 1900s. Yeah, so World War I would still count because context can be before or after. But it's kind of a weak connection with World War I because it's saying women's roles expanded when men went to war. But what did they do? It doesn't really say how they expanded, right? So that could be a little bit beefed up too. Now, taking into account that you have only 45 minutes, this isn't so bad. But once again, it just depends on how picky they're going to be. Claudia says, it says their efforts face barriers, but it doesn't say barriers, and you don't know, though. True. Yeah, that is true. So if this is their thesis, it would not get the thesis point because it doesn't list the stuff. But their thesis might have been in the next paragraph. I just can't remember. I should have put it on there. Let's see. Gary says, restating the prompt is fine, but there isn't an argument. True. Yeah, you got to make sure and have an argument. Wan Ying says, I heard that you can rewrite your thesis again at the end of the essay because this way you would have a higher chance to earn the thesis point. You can do that, Wan Ying. Yes, you can absolutely do that because if they don't give it to you in the first paragraph, when you rewrite it, they may give it to you however it's rewritten. But only do that if you have time. Gary says they hadn't wrote what the extent. Yeah, very good. So very true. If this is your context, if it is your context, you might have a thesis in your paper. I'll have to check on that later. But I just wanted to point out with the context, this is not bad and would probably get the point, but you could put in a little bit more specific if you know it, all right? And those one-pagers are going to help you with the specifics. Okay, let's look at this one. I think it's another context. So it says, revolutionary Enlightenment ideas for more freedom and equality spread like wildfire throughout the world, starting from Europe in the 18th century. These Enlightenment ideals included the idea of unalienable rights, such as life, property, liberty, and property, as mentioned by John Locke. So we've got some specifics. That's good. Enlightenment philosophers also talked of equality for all. However, there were some major problems with these ideas as they excluded women as well as slaves and people of color. Thus, the idea of feminism arose in the late 18th and 19th century as women tried to fight for the rights of women to also be included in Enlightenment ideals and documents such as the Declaration of the Rights of Man and the Citizen. In fact, as a response to this document, Olympe Georges or Greg, I'm not sure exactly how to say that name, wrote the Declaration of the Rights of Women and Female Citizen. In modern society, women had faced a multitude of great barriers in their path for more equal treatment because women had not been provided with adequate education, which resulted in them having unskilled labor jobs in factories. Women also faced many barriers for more unequal treatment because they had no political representation in society. So this last part that starts with in modern society, that's their thesis. Would they get the context point? They've got specifics. They've got several specifics, actually. They've even got some documents that they've mentioned. But would this get context? What do you think? Nobody wants to answer. Anybody brave out there? You can always do no or yes with a question mark. Everybody's saying yes. Gary says the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen stuff could have possibly been used later for outside evidence. Could have been, yeah. All right, so my vote is no, this would not get context because it needs to tie this to the thesis. Now, some might argue that it does because it talks about women's rights being excluded. But once again, it depends on how picky the person is that reads your DBQ is going to be. If they had something along the lines of these ideas from the 18th century carried on into modern society and women continue to face barriers, and then you could go into your thesis sentence, then I know for sure 100% that would get context, 100%. Now, it's a possibility that whoever reads this might say, oh, well, yeah, that connects it enough because it's talking about women and that connection is fine, okay? But try to have some kind of transition sentence that takes your context into your thesis, all right? Try to have something there that will pull that in, all right? And in this case, Cotty says plot twist. Yeah. In this case, it's tricky. I can't say for sure that this wouldn't get the point because, like I said, it depends on how picky they're going to be when they read this stuff. But when I graded a while ago, they were very picky. So you just want to, make sure that you're covering your bases. And the best way to do that would be to have a transition sentence that connects those two. Sana says, can you please repeat the transition sentence? Sure. So let me think about it. So what I would do probably is I would maybe say these challenges that women faced in the 18th century carried on into modern society in several ways. Then you could start your thesis and say, women have faced a multitude of great barriers in their path for more equal treatment, and then continue to go on with what you were saying. Now, like I said, though, not 100% sure. This could get context. Now, for this person, when I graded this, what I did was I gave them outside evidence instead of context because they talk about enlightenment. So I gave them outside evident point for that. And then I gave them an outside evident point for the documents that they mentioned and explained. That could happen too, because even though you might be intending it for context, if the reader doesn't think that it's context or it doesn't apply to context to get that point, they can use it for something else. So that's always a possibility. Rose says, if there are two readers, would they pick the highest score? I think they're going to average it, Rose, but I'm not positive about that. We'll know more when we start grading. But I think they average it. All right, so thesis. I said, hey, y'all nailed the thesis. I only had a couple people that didn't write what they were going to argue, and that was a quick fix. I just told them in their comments. So thesis, we're not even going to worry about because you guys have it. Just remember with thesis, you have to have an argument. So whatever you're talking about in your paragraphs, that needs to be in your thesis. So for example, for this one, a lot of you put in there about, let's look at this other thesis. This one was really good. So it says, although many individuals and organizations began to advocate for women's education and equal opportunities for the rights of men, here they are. Women have been denied political involvement. That's their first paragraph. given inferior employment opportunities, second paragraph, and working conditions, third paragraph. And then here is where they say about to what extent. All right, so those are the things that you want to try to answer. Now, the other way that you can write your thesis is if you see something, for example, this kind of goes with effects on women. So you could talk about effects of women as, to what extent were those effects. You could talk about changes if your thesis kind of goes with that, or continuities, or what are the other ones? Cause and effect, change, continuity, similarities and differences. You can also put that in your thesis. All right. So you can do that too. But you just have to make sure that whatever you're going to write about in your paragraphs goes in your thesis. And that usually is the different groups that you make with the documents. All right. Cloudy says you can put outside evidence in the intro. Okay. So Cloudy, you can, but I don't think you should. I think you should write every DBQ in the exact same way that you have been practicing, because that way you won't forget anything. Like I always tell my students, context, thesis, first paragraph, second paragraph, third paragraph, and in those body paragraphs, write it describe, support, explain, describe, support, explain, describe, support, explain, and just throw outside evidence in there where it goes. Then hopefully you won't forget any of this stuff. Now this year, since you can have papers with you, I would suggest printing out a copy of the rubric or writing it on a piece of paper so that you can mark them off as you do it, okay? But they can count outside evidence anywhere in the paper, all right? So does that make sense? Let me know. Let's see. Rose says, one word, game changer, 2 words, lots of laughs. Yeah, that's true. But like I said, do it in the same order you've been practicing. And then if it doesn't work for context, they might possibly use it for a different point. And then he says, what historical thinking skills would this DBQ be classified as? I would say probably cause and effects would work with this one the best, because it's effects on women. Like what happens to them as a result of not having these rights, or the barriers are kind of like the effects. So that's the one I would go with. But if you get on the DBQ and you're totally blanking about which one does this go with, just skip that part. Don't even worry about it, because that goes with your unicorn point, and that's super hard to get, A, and B, it may not even matter in the grand scheme of things. Gary said, did that person make groups or those reasons? Yeah, I would say that person did that. Yeah, because each one of these parts of their thesis has documents to go with it. So as you're reading your documents, you'll find the ones that didn't, talk about voting. That's denied political rights. You'll talk about employment and working conditions in each one of the documents. So yeah, those should be groups. And that's how I tell my students to make their thesis, by putting them into groups. Yes, that was a very good thesis, Cloudy. Yep, very good. Wan Ying said, so during the AP, we need all 5 paragraphs. So you don't really need a 5th paragraph, Wan Ying. I would put context and thesis in 1 paragraph, and then you'll have your 3 body paragraphs, then sprinkle your outside evidence in. But if you want to make that a 5th paragraph, it doesn't really matter. You're not going to be graded on how many paragraphs as long as you have the information in there. Gary says you don't need the paragraphs, you just need the points. That is true. I find it easier to write it in paragraphs though, Gary, because it keeps me organized. But you do however you do, you do you, boo. Oh, I find myself funny tonight. Okay, Dustin says, do they care if you use fancy words? No, you don't get extra points for using fancy words. Now you do get points based on specifics, right? So specifics are like vocab words, people, events, things that specific happened so that you can show your knowledge. And that's all stuff that we put on the 1-pagers. Claudia says bullet points. I'm not sure if they would give you points for bullet points. I think they have to be full sentences, but I'll get back to you on that one. I'm not positive about that. And, if you get to the end and you don't have enough time left, I would write some bullet points and maybe you'll get lucky. Claudia says, I thought this was comparison. It could be. You could write it as comparison, but then you're going to have to compare the women in the different countries, Cloudy, and I'm not sure we have enough documents to do that. But if you could find or compare how they're treated, maybe, I suppose you could do all similarities if you wanted. It would just have to be dependent upon how you write that. Wang Ying says, I mean, like if you only have 5 documents, how do you sort it into 3 groups and into 3 paragraphs? Okay, I see. So Wang Ying, you don't necessarily need 3 groups. What you're going to do is let the documents tell you, okay? Let me pull up the documents here, and we'll talk about this just for a second, because that's a good question. Can I get another share? I don't know if I can or not. Okay. Let me pull them up here. I don't know if that's going to work. I usually have my other computer, and I was just like slipping tonight, and I didn't bring my other computer. But here, we're just going to remove that, and then we're going to add another one with an application. Here we go. All right, so for your documents, remember, as you're going through them, start putting them in groups. So this first one talked about voting rights and the lack of voting rights. Put beside this one, lack of voting rights. Now, if you're doing the DBQ organizer, like what we've been practicing in the DBQ lives, then you can just put that on a piece of paper. You could put document 1, describing it is the lack of voting rights, and then pull something from this document that proves that. Well, I would say that the brave women are enslaved and there's no ballot, but still we have to pay a tax. Well, what's the whole point? What's the problem with that? She's basically saying, hey, we're working and we're paying taxes just like the men, but you're still not letting us have a say in things, all right? So that would be good for supporting. And you could put that in your DBQ organizer and write it in your own words. Then you're going to go on to your next document. You're going to say, oh, this one is a list of, Women's Charter from South Africa, and they want the right to vote too. Oh, boom. Document 1 and document 2 go in the same group because they're both talking about voting rights. So that could be a group. Now, let's say document 3 talks about voting rights too. Put that in the same group. You could potentially have all one group if you want. Now, that's very unlikely because the documents are probably going to talk at least about 2 different things. Probably they might talk about 3 things, and then you'd have to have 3 groups. And that means that if you need to have 3 groups, you could potentially just have 1 document in that group. That's fine too. All right. So however you want to group them is completely fine. They're not going to say, oh, you can't group it like that. That is up to you. And there's no category anymore. There used to be a category that said that you had to have a certain number in each group, but that doesn't exist anymore. So you don't have to worry about that. All right, let me check on these comments, and then we are going to go on. Let's see. Lou says, I use the conclusion to add more information, potentially get the complexity point. Yeah, that's fine. Tammy says, Miss, can you go over sourcing? Yeah, we're going to get to that, Tammy. Rose says, what if I submit a documentary about the French Revolution? What do you mean, a documentary about a French Revolution? I'm not sure what you mean about that. You mean if you put that in context? Cloudy says, that was just a joke, but you're being serious. Let's go. What was a joke? I don't know what mess I missed. Oh, Cloudy says, I do 3. You mean you do 3 groups? Oh, you mean that Wan Ying was being serious. I see. Okay. Gary says, give points, please, and send the exam. Yeah, that's not going to work. Good choice, or good suggestion, though. Rose says, I'll make a song about the Song Dynasty. I'm sure there will be some that will put some crazy things in there. Trust me. Noella says, I like these documents a lot. Yeah, these documents were pretty good documents. They were pretty straightforward. Although there was one document that only two people figured out the really deep root of it. And we're going to go over that in just a second. Claudia says, okay, so we should just choose one thing about a document. We don't have to reference the whole thing as evidence. Yes, exactly. So, for example, that one was about the voting rights. So pull something from that document that proves that. All right. I can see some light bulbs coming on. So Teresa says, if you're really stuck and none of the documents fit together for you, could you hypothetically make 4 or 5 groups? Yes, you could. It's just going to take a little bit longer, Teresa, because you'd have more to write, I guess, more to prove, but you could absolutely do that. Claudia says, wow, I thought I had to be at least 2. No, it does not have to be at least 2. There's nothing on the rubric that talks about that anymore. Noah said, would it be easier if you put them into smaller amount of groups? Yeah, it could potentially be easier, but it just depends on if they go in that group or not. Sometimes when I've read DBQs, I just can't for the life of me figure out which, there's usually one document that I'm like, where does this even go? So just make it its own paragraph or its own group. Cloudy says, I think there's a delay with the live. There might be a little bit of a delay. Everybody's internet is a little slower. Rose says, never mind. I was just saying if I made a documentary in exchange for the essay. Oh, yeah, no, that wouldn't work. Sorry. Patel says, I have a question. What's the difference between maritime expedition and imperialism? Wow, that's really off the topic. But maritime expedition would be what they did in 1450 to 1750, where they're building maritime empires. So maritime empires would be these large empires that they had to take boats to basically get like seafaring empires. Okay. And then imperialism is where they're going and making colonies and taking raw resources from those. So if you listen to my video on Unit 4, I think it's Unit 4 is maritime empires, and then imperialism would be Unit 6. That will help. All right, Dustin says, so your description is the document in general. Okay, so we're getting into that, Dustin, right now. All right, so let's talk about the difference between describe and supports, because this is where several of you guys had some problems, and this one is difficult. Okay, so don't get upset with yourself that that you are struggling with this. Okay, so let's look at this. Describe is the main idea of the document. What is the document talking about? Okay, here we go. Oh, no. Okay. So describe is what the document is talking about. Support is taking something from that document, putting it into your own words, and using it to support your argument. All right, this is where we struggle. Most of you understand how to describe. Most of you are really good at telling me what the document is about. But then you have to pull something to support. All right, so let's look at some examples. This is from document 1. It says, as seen in Anna Manning Comfort's The Public 2, she details the comparison of being Black and how being a woman is in the same ballpark range because they are both being enslaved. So this part right here would get the describes point because it's telling what the document is about. Now, one thing I would suggest to this person is instead of taking the time to write out Anna Manning Comfort's The Public 2, just say document 1, as seen in document 1. It's much faster. You don't need to tell the author and all that stuff. You just don't need to do it. All right. But that's just a suggestion to get things done faster. And they even have document 1 back here. So you could potentially just take out this part and replace it with document 1, and then you wouldn't need it behind there. So that's the describes part. Okay. That's telling me what the document is about. Now let's look at the next part. This is interesting because this shows that because women were not treated equal, they lost their chance in the ability to vote or even recognize that women were more than just sex toys or sexual toys. Okay. So this isn't too bad for supports, but the only problem is, let me see if I can put this where's the documents? Documents. Where are they at? Let me open the documents real quick. The problem here is that you need to pull something from the document that you can reword to prove your point. Okay. Now let me see if I can make this work here. I'm going to put this over here. There we go. All right. Now, can you see it on the live stream? That's the question. Yes, we can. Okay. So she is trying to prove, or he, can't remember who, that the comparison of being Black and how being a woman is in the same ballpark of being enslaved. So being a woman is like being a slave, basically. That's what she is saying that this document is about. And in her thesis, she was talking about how women were likened to slaves because they weren't allowed to vote, okay? So we need to pull something from this document that proves that. So come over to your document and look for something like that. So I would use enslaved women are brave women, no ballot while you tax. So I would talk about how, like, right here. Okay, so this may have been where she was like getting the sex part. You could say, yes, one of them is sex. Now that means female, right? That means gender. That's what she's referring to there, and how that is enslaving the woman and that they cannot have a vote, okay? So here's the key. You have to pull something from the document. This part right here could be true, but it's not from the document, and that's the problem. That's why it didn't get the support point. And NNE says, when we refer to a document, we can just refer to the author's last name, right? I'm pretty sure somewhere in there you have to have the document number, but you could also use the author's last name if you want. Just make sure that you have the document number in there somewhere. Patel says, so rather than summarizing the document, you should tell the reader how it relates back to the prompt. Yes, 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 yes. Because that's your argument, right? However it relates back to the prompt is your argument. If you are arguing that women were treated like slaves because they were not allowed to vote, then you need to pull something from this document to prove that. I think we might be getting it, guys. I think we might be getting it. Rose says, how do you relate it to the document then? Okay, so that's the problem. That's where we got to figure it out. So right here, if she's making the argument that you can't, if she's making the argument that women are enslaved because they're not allowed to vote, then I would pull this part that I have highlighted right here and say, you could even maybe talk about, I would probably pull this part right here and say that women are basically enslaved because they're working to pay a tax, but they're not allowed to vote. And by not allowing them to vote, they don't have a say in government. Do you see, Rose, how that works? Jessica says, yeah, also to prove your thesis to support your argument. Yes, Jessica, yes. Gary says, it's weird supporting because I think I make it pretty clear in the description. Okay, yeah, description and support, completely different. Description is your main idea and what the document's talking about, but support is pulling something from that. And I'm going to go over some more examples here in a minute that will hopefully make that more clear. Madison says, so do you have to use specific details from history on support, or do you just connect it back to your thesis? I'm not sure exactly what you mean. What you have to do for support is pull something from the document and reword it. That's what you have to do. Rose says, that makes sense. Okay, sweet. Sweet. Thu says, would you relate back to your argument by expanding on it? Yes, Thu. Yeah, you can do that. The big thing with supports that they want to see is that you understand what that document is talking about, and you can pull information out of that document. Okay. Victoria says, can you leave out something in the description and use it when supporting? Yes, you could do that because, listen, the description is just the main idea. So you're not really pulling a lot out of the document when you're describing. Does that make sense? Let's look at some other examples. Let's look at this one. This is for document 1 too, but this is from a different person. So it says, Anna Comfort wrote a poem explaining how the American society treated minorities, like African Americans and women. poorly as they were limited from voting even as they worked. So that's the description. This shows that women faced hardships to gain equal rights as they did not have a chance to vote, even though they worked just as hard. Now, the problem with, once again, with this supports is it doesn't pull anything out of the document that tells the reader that that person understands this document. So this person would need to pull something out that shows that they didn't have the chance to vote and they're working just as hard. Once again, they could use this part and they could talk about how the author compares women to slaves because they don't have the right to vote and they're still working. The documents are in the description, Patel, if you want to look at them. They're down there in the description. Oh, thank you, Sana. Thank you for telling him. Okay. So let's look at a good one. Let's look at one that would get the point. Let's try this one. Let's see how this one is. It says, likewise, document 1, a poem called The Home Burdens of Uncle Sam. That part you wouldn't have to put in there. Save your time. You don't even have to do that. But it's fine. Addresses the white man's burden in a sarcastic tone and puts emphasis on the issues of women. This shows that the government was more focused on their white man's burden and taking care of foreign issues instead of acknowledging women's desire to gain extended rights. Anna Manning Comfort, through writing this poem, aimed to criticize using the white man's burden ideology to justify acts of intervening in other countries and attempted to urge the government to take action on internal issues that women's political rights, or that of women's political rights. Now, do you see the difference between that one and the ones we just read? Big difference, right? Because this person is pulling in the fact and the significance of white man's burden. What's the white man's burden poem all about? The original. It's about imperialism. It's about going in and taking over and helping them, right? And this person wrote that Anna Manning is kind of using that to criticize the fact that white men are going into other countries to help them, but yet they're not helping in their own country. That is pulling something from the document, the idea of white man's burden, and applying it to support the argument. Let me know if you see the difference. Teresa says, for the support point, would you say something along the lines, the painting shows the Mongols wearing heavy armor and holding advanced weapons, which proves they participated in warfare. If that's what you're trying to prove, Teresa, then yeah, that would work. Jessica says, I think that's more of a description. It is a part of the description, but it depends on how she's describing the painting too. And it depends on what she's trying to prove. That one's a hard one to say because we don't actually have documents for that, unless you're talking about a different DBQ that we've done. Tell says, what do you think the best way to lay out the DBQ is? My teacher says it's topic, sentence, document, evidence, evidence, analysis, outside evidence, and the same in the next paragraph. So I tell my students to do context, thesis, and then topic, sentence, definitely topic, sentence, describe, support, and explain. But it looks like your teacher might be calling them a little bit different, which is fine. And so if that's the case, then I think that's pretty much the same way that I suggest it. Any way that you do it, just do it the same way every time so that you don't forget something. And then he says, should we be more careful not to quote anything? Yes, you cannot quote. Do not quote. You're taking, so for this instance, the white man's burden, that you kind of have to quote because it's a quote in the document. But there's a couple other examples that I have in here that actually quote. You definitely can't do that. They will skip right over it. Thu says, that was amazing. Yes, this one was really good. I was blown away by this one because this one takes the document to a deeper level. It's complexity, right? It really gets into that document and why it's important. That's kind of the stuff that they're looking for. Now, you may not be able to get that deep, but you can still get that support point if you pull something from the document. Madison says, okay, so you would just Save connecting it back to the thesis for evidence. I think so. I'm not exactly sure what you mean. What do you mean for evidence? What are you talking about there? Gary says, European, be my slave. Native, why? European, I want to help you. Okay, Gary, you're just the comedy relief. I love it. Rose says, okay, so using quotation of white man's version and then describing it in relation to your prompt, that's okay. Yeah, so because right here in the poem, she quotes it and she's talking about that specific poem, I think that would be okay. But you're not pulling, like, I wouldn't take this whole part right here and quote it. You have to put that in your own words because that shows that you understand it if you're going to do it. Thu says, is this purpose for the hip? Okay, so that last part, Anna Manning, comfort through writing the poem aimed to criticize. Yeah, so that would be a good one for purpose. Yes, I believe that's what this person was going for. Now, remember, for those, we have some specific questions, and I'll go over those in a minute to help you remember how to do those. Patel says, what do you believe the best way to manage time is? We'll talk about that at the end, Patel. If I forget, remind me. Rose says, wait, we can't quote, not even a word. No, I would not quote at all. You're putting it all into your own words, except for if you have something like this that's like really specific, but don't quote at all. Lana says, if we leave out the topic sentence, would we still get the point, like going straight into the document? Yes, they don't grade on topic points, or topic sentences. But the nice thing, Lana, with the topic sentence is it helps guide your writing. So, for example, if you're writing a paragraph and all of a sudden you forget, what am I arguing? You can look at your topic sentence real quick and see that. All right, so that's why I always suggest putting topic sentences in. But if it's something that you feel like you don't need to do, you don't have to do it. Sana says the writing you just went over also got the point for explaining and sourcing right. Yes. Yeah, this would get a point for explaining for purpose. So, yeah, that was very well written. All right, let's look at this one. This is for document 3, the plight of women's work in early industrial revolution in England. That's the document. Women had to work long hours from up to 8 to 11, 6 to midnight. This wasn't reworded. So this part right here was quoted. Make sure that you're rewording that. Now, that's going to be kind of difficult to reword because, once again, this is pretty specific, but you could say something like, women had to work long hours, sometimes from 8 in the morning until midnight, or I'm sorry, sometimes from 8 in the morning to, that doesn't really make sense. I think they meant 11 p.m. Maybe they copied it wrong. But just put it into your own words. All right, let's go on. Not only that, but women suffered from health problems such as hunger, lung and circulation problems, and pain in the side. So that part is good because it describes the document. Then it says, this shows that women faced barriers because they were weakened and damaged by the evils of the factory system. And this was a job that they were forced to do because pay for women was lower than men. And this led to males being fired and women being employed. This also led to women becoming the people who took care of the family. Therefore, they had to work to feed their family, especially during this time when males were leaving to the Americas. Okay, that's a lot of stuff right there, right? That's a lot of stuff. Luckily, you are not getting graded on whether or not your English is good because that's a huge run-on sentence. But this isn't too bad, except for the fact that you have to make sure that some of this was pulled from the document. So if we look at document 3, what's pulled from the document? Well, they pulled these from the document, but that's not put in your own words, so you might not get points for that. Okay, talks about the destruction of the health. All right, so there is some pulled from the document there. That's not too bad. And it would probably get the supports point because some of it is pulled from the document. So that one's not too bad. Jordan says, my history teacher has taught us to quote ironically. Although after the quote, we always describe what the quote means and then we support and connect it to the thesis. That's fine, Jordan, as long as you describe what the quote means, because I have heard that the people who are reading it, if you quote anything, they just skip right over it and they don't even read it. I don't know if that is true, But that's what I've heard from other readers that have done the DBQ. I've just done the SAQ, so I'm not sure. But as long as you are describing it and like putting in your own words, I think that would be okay. It just might waste a little bit of time if you're doing both, but that's up to you. If you're a fast writer and you can do that, then that's fine. Gary says, technically, if they wrote it wrong, they did put it in their own words, Miss C. Okay, well, that's true. But they put 8 a.m. to 11 a.m., and that's not true. Do you see what I see? Do you see what I mean? Thu says, the College Board wants to know your location. They already know our location, Thu. Like, come on. The College Board is like, they're smart. They know what's going on. All right, so this one's not too bad. I'm pretty sure that would get the describe and the support. Let's look at this one. It says, on top of these horrendous working conditions and their domestic duties within the household, women had to work very, very long hours, ranging from 15 to 18 hours. That is far more than the daily average working hours for women to today's society, which ranges from 5 to 8. All right, so the problem with this one is this has nothing to do with the argument, a barrier, like it's got nothing to do with anything. So this wouldn't be too bad for describing the document, but then you have to make sure that you have your argument in there and that you're supporting it. Dwight says, it's good to think, name, explain, connect when you work with evidence. Okay, name, oh, so I see what you're saying. So like name the evidence, explain the evidence, and connect it. Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. Thank you, Cloudy. I appreciate that. Enemy muy así? Is that French? I don't know. Let me know. I am way too tired to be translating French. Cloudy says, YouTube lives. All right. Invictus says, I'm too fast of a writer to where I forget what I'm doing. Yes, Gary. I could see that happening to you. And Noella says, lots of laughs. The College Board is scary. They are. They're like the mafia. Okay. Enemy said, oh, it's Francais. Okay. I was right. It was French. Okay. So this one, this is just, it doesn't make any sense to the argument. So make sure that when you're polling something that you're rewording it and making sense to the argument. All right, let's look at document 4. I think this one was really good too. I think this was another drop the mic one. Document 4 was Aung San Suu Kyi, I think that's how you say her name. Excerpts from keynote address at APC conference, or document 4, describe how the women have only played a role in upholding household duties and have not ever caused a war, but have been the greatest victims in times of political conflict. So that pretty much describes it. By illustrating these injustices, she emphasizes the need for education and involvement for women, which is the only way to promote peace. So this part right here is something that's pulled from the document and put into your own words. Then the writer goes on to say, the fact that women have not ever caused a war shows how they have not been given the opportunity to be involved in politics and to make decisions for the state, yet suffer from the conflicts started by men, illustrating how they have not been given equal political representation, which serves as a barrier for them to gain equal rights. This is fantastic because that connects it to what they're arguing. So this person has done 3 things really well. They've described the document. They've pulled something from the document that supports their argument. And then they took it a step further and talked about how that document supports it. Do you see the difference between that and this? It's a big difference. DeWatt says the readers know the documents word to word because they have analyzed them. Yes, that is true. The readers, I think when I did it, we get almost like 2 or 3 days of training. So yeah, the readers, you can't pull anything over on the readers. Rose says, how many times do we have to analyze it like that? What do you mean? How many times do you have to support? You have to support 4 times. I would suggest doing it 5 so that you have some extras. All right, let's look at this one. This one says, lastly, document 4 describes an address by a Nobel Prize laureate. This is from the female perspective. of Aung San Suu, or however you say her name. She states how women have worked on the home front for far too long. As a result of only having a say there, women are usually the ones that get the most harm out of the conflicts of war. They are the ones most hurt in times of calamities, yet they aren't able to project any representation within these calamities. This one's not too bad. The only thing is that I would probably say like this kind of describes it, but this you are told in the source. So they're not going to give you any points for saying something that you learned from the source. So this would probably get some of the describes, and this might connect it to supports, but it's kind of weak. So you'd want to beef that up a little bit in order to ensure that you're going to get that point. All right. NNE says, I do see the difference. Sweet, NNE. Making progress. Gary says, yeah, that one is using New Times Roman. Oh, my gosh. Gary. Oh, ever the comedian you are. Oh, you're so funny. All right. Let's look at these. Document 5 says, an image that depicts these factory conditions well is document 5, where it shows women working, and only women because they are able to work for low wages. This one's just too vague. I mean, it says an image that depicts these factory conditions. What factory conditions? What are we talking about here? And in the previous sentence, they might have explained that a little bit, but I would narrow it in and say like poor working conditions in the factories or something like that. Be very obvious what you're trying to get at, because the readers can also not read into what you're trying to talk about. And then, yeah, clearly it shows women working, but what about this picture is unique? What can you say about this picture? Well, they're all wearing dresses, and look at all the gears and the things that their dresses could get caught in. I'm sure some of you talked about the dangers of working in factories for women. That could be something that you could expound on here. Let's look at this one. Document 5 shows a picture of female workers working in a factory stamping out end discs. This is a better description, but once again, pretty sure it says that in the source. So make sure that you're adding something to it that's not just given to you in the source. This shows that women could work outside the house in factories. However, they were unable to receive equal treatment in the working spheres as well. Their values were taken differently from men, and they received less wages. This is all true, but none of that is coming from this document. You have to pull something from this document to prove your argument. And I can't remember what this person's argument was, but I think it was poor working conditions in the factory. So what could you pull from this document? Now, another thing that you need to remember with pictures and paintings, you have to reference that picture. So you could say something like, as seen in the picture, women wearing dresses around all of these gears was very dangerous because they could get caught up in them and pulled into the machinery. Something like that. You're completely putting it with that picture or that document. I'll get to your comments in just a second. I want to look at this last one. It says, similarly in document 5, we see women working in mass producing factory, which utilizes the concept of assembly lines, where each person was given one specific specialized task to repeat for hours and hours a day. This resulted in more efficiency for the factory, and these jobs often required unskilled workers, which led to uneducated women working in these jobs. That one's not too bad because it talks a lot about the picture and what's going on in the picture. Just make sure that you're connecting what's going on in the picture to whatever you're trying to argue. Okay, Cloudy says, let's see. Oh, he said, never mind. Okay. Dustin said, I didn't know I said they weren't wearing any gloves and their hands could get injured. That could be okay as long as you are relating that to your argument. If you're arguing unsafe working conditions, that could possibly work. But you also need to mention that you saw that in the picture. You have to connect it to the picture. Once again, that's being very picky, but I just don't know how picky they're going to be this year. Lana says, if we just completely can't understand what a document is talking about, can we just leave it out? Yes, you can. You only have to support with 4 documents. So that gives you 1 document that you can leave out. However, I would try to throw it in there because then you'll have an extra just in case. But if you can't, then you can't. Okay, let's keep going because we've been at this an hour. I want to make sure that we get through all of this stuff. All right, let's talk about, let's talk about explaining. So remember, we have 4 ways of explaining. If you've not watched my explaining video, make sure you do that. I give you all of this information in the explain video, but we're just going to go over it real quick. If you're talking about purpose, you need to ask yourself, what is the purpose of the document, and why is that important in relation to how the document is written? What is the purpose, and why is it important in how the document is written? The problem with this is that most people forget the why part, okay? Then we also have point of view. Who is the author? What do they believe? And why do they believe it? What is making them believe that? Historical context is what is going on at the time the document is written, and why does that matter? How does it affect the document? Audience is who is the audience, and why is that important? All right, so those are the things that we are going to be talking about when we go into explain. Let me make sure I haven't missed anything. Quick question, do we hip off 4 or 5 documents? I would, because then you'll have some extras, but if you don't have time, you only need 2. Noella, if what you're saying is just straight up false, is the point completely voided? Not necessarily, Noella, because sometimes there's something else in that DBQ that they can use for that point. You know what I'm saying? So like if you don't get it for outside evidence, maybe you'll get it for context or something like that. Okay. Ashley says, so even if we don't know what a document is about, we can still try to use it? Sure. You don't get any points taken off for not getting it right. So you can still try to use it. Cloudy says, one way I have seen this is happy. Yep, you could remember it that way. Lana said, Gary's out here coming for your job, Missy. I'm not worried. He's comedy relief. I mean, I'm not too worried, Lana. But I do enjoy Gary, and he definitely keeps things humorous. Don't you, Gary? All right. Joam says, which one is easiest to do? Well, it depends, Joam, on the document. And I'll explain that here in a minute. Okay, so we're going to hop into this and start looking at this. So for document 1, this person said, overall, the purpose the Women's Charter lists are all barriers that women had to comparison to men. That is true. That's the purpose. But that person did not answer, why is that important to the writing of the document? So knowing the purpose, what's that even matter? Okay, like that's important. You can't get that point without that. So for example, with the Women's Charter, it was a list of very specific things that women wanted. And we know that the purpose was to make sure that men knew that women wanted this, right? So talk about how it's written. It's written very specifically. It's written with a commanding tone. All of those have to do with the purpose. If their purpose was just to mention, hey, we kind of like to have these rights, would they have been wording it the same way? No, they're wording it more forcefully because that's their purpose. So that's why that would not get the explain point. Lou says, is it true that you teach reviews your DBQ from the exam, and if they believe you deserve higher points, they could help the student? Oh, your teacher. Yeah. Yes, your teacher will be getting your DBQs back, and if they believe that you deserve higher, they can argue for you. I think you have to get a 3 or higher to qualify for that, though. If you get a 1 or 2, I don't think they can argue for you. But I'm not positive about that. All right, let's look at this other one. Document 2, the purpose of, I guess that doesn't, it's the same one. Okay, the purpose of Women's Charter is to inform the public about the rights that women should have and influence them to agree with the rights by writing in a formal and authoritarian way to stress the importance of these equal treatments. Okay, that one would work because it's saying why that purpose is important. If they're informing the public about these rights of women and what they want, and they're writing this in an authoritarian tone. Do you see the difference between those two? And why one would get the point and the other one wouldn't? Let me know. Pretty sure it's clear when you see examples. I think that helps. Dustin says the purpose of this document is to attract other women and get them to join the women's charter. So the document is written in a way where they embellish the rights the women will receive if they unite. Okay, that could possibly be, yeah, that could possibly be true. Evicta says, you know what? Just slide a Benjamin over. Gary. I am not that rich. I don't have any Benjamins. Claudia says, I wish I had more time to learn about DBQ just because of the enclosing exam, but because it's okay. Well, if you are taking APUSH next year, you'll have plenty of time to learn about the DBQ because you guys have to write one of these in APUSH too. All right, let's look at this one. Document 2 takes place in context of women receiving these rights in countries such as England and America and is inspired by their suffrage and activist movements as South African women hope the same liberties are given to them. Okay, that's pretty good because if you look at the date on this, it's 1954, and let's see, women in Europe and America got rights in like 1920s. So that would work, except for the fact you're not saying how that's important to the writing of the document. So you could say something like the way that they write the document is influenced by the way that English and American women fought for suffrage in 1920s. Something like that. You have to connect it to why that's important. Okay. All right. Document 3 illustrates the terrible working conditions women had to suffer in factories. It describes the long hours and the pain some faced while working. This document was written in the midst of the Industrial Revolution when women were increasingly being employed in factories and working for little pay. So it's important for the author to speak for all women and demand better working conditions. Okay, that one's pretty good because it talks about the historical context. The Industrial Revolution, right? And then the reason why he's writing this way is because of the demand for better working conditions. So that would answer those questions. Then this one, the point of view of the author of document 4 is a woman's rights fighter, and thus she had a profound understanding of what women wanted. That's true, but how does that affect the document? So if you look at document 4, that's the one where she's talking about war and how women should have a right to vote. Beef that one up a little bit and talk about, I remember why I did this one. Point of view is who is the writer, what do they believe, and why do they believe it? All right, so we know this, she's the writer, she's a Nobel Prize laureate, so she's very educated. That part about her is probably influencing why she wants this to happen, as well as being a woman, because women are going to think differently than men. Clearly, it's in her topic where she's talking about how men are the one who start wars, whereas women don't want wars, right? So the why part is important. The point of view of the author of document 4 is a woman's rights fighter. That's who she is. Thus, she had a profound understanding of what women wanted, which was to have a right to vote and be able to influence society. Make sure you add that on and then say, she felt this way because she herself was educated and wanted to be able to influence society. All right. That why part is super, super duper important. What outside the writer makes them want to do it? Okay. Another thing that you can look for when you're looking for point of view, as you're looking through these sources, look for people's religions. Their religion always affects their point of view. If you are religious, you will have a different point of view than someone who is not religious. Look for gender. Look for how rich they are, or how poor they are, how educated they are. Everything that's outside of the document. All right. Does anybody have any quick questions about how to explain? Tammy says, it makes sense right now, but it flies out of my head as soon as I start writing. I totally understand that, Tammy. That's why it's super important for you to write yourself some little notes that's going to help you. Put them on your one-pagers or make a separate one-pager that has all the questions that you ask yourself when you're explaining these. Okay, those questions that I just went over, you can also watch the explain video to get a little bit more in depth about that. Write those questions out so that when you are doing an explain, you can look at that. You can say, oh yeah, I got to answer who is the author, what do they believe, and why do they believe it. And then put some little cheats on there of like the why part goes with religion and socioeconomic status and gender and all of that stuff, okay? Make yourself a little cheat sheet that's going to help you. Rose says, what if the reader accidentally picks the wrong hip we were trying to analyze? You mean the reader or you? I'm not sure exactly what you mean, but you can hip any document. The problem is that some documents are not aren't as suited for a certain hip as others. For example, if you don't know much about the author, then point of view is going to be hard to do, because to do point of view, you have to know something about them. You have to know what their religion is or how rich they are. So you pick the hip based on the document. You can do all the same ones on different documents if you want. There's no category that says, hey, you have to do one point of view and you have to do one purpose. You can pick whichever ones you want. Who says, oh, I think I finally understand the why. Sweet. I love light bulb moments. Cloudy says, this is really clicking. Really, really clicking. All right. I'm liking that. I like it. DeWitt says, hip is confusing, but this is found a PDF. Okay, sweet. Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. Victoria says, could it be something like the writer was educated, people therefore listen to her, that explains the powerful and passionate wording? Sure. Yeah. You can say that because she's educated, she has a way of talking about this powerfully and passionately to get people to understand. Yeah, sure. Ashley says, so why is the why they wrote it? The why is how it relates to the document, Ashley. So it's different for each one. For example, purpose. What is the purpose? And why is that important in relation to the document? So for this one, the purpose was to expose the barriers that women faced, right? So why is it important that we know that? Well, when you read the document, is this wishy-washy? Or is it straight to the point? It's pretty straight to the point, right? They're saying, hey, this is the stuff that we want. We will strive to obtain this. They're not just saying, we kind of want it. You know, so the purpose relates to like they want it to show these barriers that women are facing. Why is that important to the writing? Well, it's important because it shows that they're serious in the way that they write and their tone. Does that make sense? Not really like finding the words to explain that one very well tonight. And then for the point of view, the why part is, why do they believe this? What outside the document makes them believe that? Does that make a little bit more sense? If not, watch the explaining video, because I felt like I did a pretty good job in that one. You know, not to pat myself on the back, but I felt like that was pretty good. Isabella says, I wrote every way to explain with the questions so that I remember to answer the questions in order. Yeah, that's a good idea, Isabella. Rose says, that makes sense. I understand it now. Sweet. Lou says, I'm still confused about describing, as I'm not sure if I'm pulling the right info. Okay, so for describing, all you're doing, Luz, is saying the main idea of the document. You don't have to even pull really anything from the document to reword. You're just saying what the document's about. Supports is where you pull from the document. The PDF that DeWitt shared is not working. Oh, that's a bummer. DeWitt, let us know what you Googled to find that PDF. Maybe they can just Google it. Ashley says, which is the easiest for HIP? It just depends, Ashley, on the document and how much information you have about the document. Gary says, historical context. At least that's what Mr. Himmler says. Okay, Gary. Okay, I see you. I see you. I'm still your favorite, though, right? Just saying. I better be. If not, Gary, I'm not hooking you up with Rachel. It's not happening, right, Rachel? Okay, Gary says, point of view has gotten the least success. That's because people forget to write the why part. Point of view is really easy if you remember to write the why part. I think anyway, that it's easy because point of view is always outside the document. What is affecting this document? So let me give you an example of point of view real quick. For example, do you believe in gun rights or no gun rights? Why do you believe that? maybe I believe that, and this is just an example, this is not what I believe, but I believe that everyone should be able to own a gun as long as they are mentally sound. Why do I believe that? Maybe because I have had someone break into my house before and I felt like I needed protection. But there may be someone else that doesn't agree with that because they may not have had that same experience. And therefore, they don't believe it. All right. So experiences in your life, your religion, all of that stuff affects your point of view. Watch the explains video because I give you more examples in that. Rose says, I think it depends. Yes, it definitely depends on what the document gives you. Dustin says, I understand how you do the hips, but I have watched other videos that talk about how you have to relate that hip to your argument. I have never seen that. Read the rubric and see what you think, but I don't think that that's correct. And then he says, yeah, I agree, Rose. Jessica says, I usually do point of view or purpose, especially point of view. I like point of view just because I feel like it's easiest based on, like, especially if you know someone's religion or other things about that person. Gary says, yeah, obviously, if they give you a Christian priest talking about how natives' practices are bad, point of view would be easy. Yes, because a Christian priest believes that natives are heathens. So that's an easy point of view. Isabella says, yeah, the video helped me a lot. Sweet. I'm so glad. Rose says, I tend to get historical situation plus outside evidence mixed up. Okay, historical situation is just for the document. Outside evidence is any evidence that you can add in. All right. For example, here's some outside evidence from some of the essays that I read. So you can look at those. Joam says, I'm really struggling with supporting. Yes, Joam, that one is really, really difficult. So if you are constantly struggling with supporting, I would suggest that you focus on all the other points and try to get all of those instead. Or try to support and still try to focus on the other points. But supporting is going to be difficult, and I'll talk about that a little bit more here in just a second as soon as we get finished with this. I just want to make sure I don't have any other questions. Rachel says, yeah, what Miss Z said. All right. I'm the boy, huh? Okay, Gary. Wan Ying says, are you going to have a final review over the topics tomorrow? So tomorrow, Wan Ying, probably what we'll do is we'll just go in there and talk about the thesis or the rubric a little bit more, review the rubric, review what you need to do to set up for the day, and then I'll take any other questions tomorrow. Claudia says, as someone with an antidote, they would support owning a gun. Antidote. I don't know what you mean, Claudia. Jordan says, what would be the outside information for this DBQ? So this is outside evidence. You can check that out. Isabella says, the key point is to remember the questions and to answer them. Yes, if you answer those questions, you will get explains. Lou says, so for purpose or historical evidence, we should put this purpose historical evidence. Yes, how does it affect the writing of the document? Yep, absolutely. Gary says, I have no idea how you could really connect the hip over to the argument. That'd be very difficult, and I've never heard it explained that way. So what you could do is look at the 2020 rubric and read. If you look up Tom Ritchie's 2020 rubric, I'll see if I can find it here in a minute. Just Google Tom Ritchie 2020 rubric, and it has like specifics about how you do each one, and I'm pretty sure that you don't have to do that. Claudia says the rubric says to show how or why the hip is relevant to the argument. How or why the hip is relevant. Let me look at it. I'm going to look it up. Because in that case, then maybe you need to do that. Let's look. It says how or why the document's point of view. Okay, yeah, you're right. Is relevant to an argument. Okay, so. Oh, I see. I think I see. So when you're talking about the point of view here, like for document 4, And the fact that she's a woman, that's relevant to the argument because she's a woman fighting for women's rights. So just by saying who she is would connect that to the argument. So like where you say like who is the author, what do they believe, and why they believe it, the what do they believe also connects it to the argument. So I think that those questions would still work. Does that make a little bit more sense, Dustin? Sana says, yeah, same. I don't know how to do that. Yeah, the hip is only explaining why. So maybe instead of, so for purpose, if you explain what the purpose is, then connect it to why that's relevant to the argument. So let's look at this one right here. So you're pretty much doing that with how you're writing it, because here is the purpose to inform the public about women's rights. That connects it to the argument, just talking about the women's rights. Do you know what I'm saying? Does that make sense? Jessica says, for supporting the argument, first describe the document, then say this shows or implies that. Yeah, that's good, Jessica. That's a really good point. When you're supporting the argument, you write the description first, so what the document is, and then say this shows or implies that blah, blah, blah. But Jessica, you have to make sure that you're pulling whatever you're using for supports, pull it from the document and reword it. Rachel says, you mean the author's argument? I don't know what that is in, what that is relevant to. Let me know. Okay, so that covers pretty much everything. The last thing I wanted to talk to you about is what do you do if you are not finished and you're running out of time? What I would suggest is if you're running out of time, let's say that you've written your first paragraph, you've got the describes and supports in there for the document, and you only have 10 minutes left. 10 minutes is probably not going to allow you to finish everything. If you finish the supports, you're only at the most going to get 2 points from supports. But if you finish both of the explains and both of the outside evidences, that's 4 points. So I would suggest if you're running out of time, just skip writing that second paragraph, write your explains, and write your outside evidence. Does that make sense? And then you could always go back and write more on supports if you have time, but probably 5 minutes, you know, if you're down to 10 minutes and you need 5 minutes to submit, then you're probably not going to have time to do all of that. So go for what's going to make you the most points. And then I think that's it. I think that's all I wanted to tell you guys tonight. So basically, just to recap, for your context, the important thing to remember, write yourself a little note that says, for context, connect it to the thesis somehow. Usually with a transition sentence, that works really well. All right, make sure your context connects to the thesis. Yes, Ashley, explain is the same as hip. Yes. And this is the rubric that I was telling you guys about. I really like this one. Let me show you real quick. This is the Tom Ritchie one. And it says A-push, but A-push and WAP are the same. It's right here. So let me grab that link for you. And you can use this if you want. If you don't have a printer, you can just print it out. But what I love about this one is you can mark it off as you go, and it gives you little hints about what each one is supposed to be about, okay? You could simplify it too if you wanted and just beside context write connected to the thesis. That would be fine. All right, Dustin, I'll get to that. Just give me a second. So for context, make sure you're connecting it to your thesis. For thesis, make sure you have your argument in there and that you address to what extent. If they ask you to what extent, address that. If they ask similarities and differences, address that. If they ask changes and continuities, address that. Remember, with changes, you have to talk about what it's like before and what it's like after in order to show change. Then for describe, it's just main idea. Describe is the main idea of that that document. And I think it says it right here. And then it also says quotes are not or insufficient. You cannot quote for this point. Okay. Then for supports, you're pulling something from the document and rewording it. So for example, if you're trying to prove that this document is trying to get women to have equal rights, you could say that the number 3 thing that they asked for in this in document number 2 is that women have equal rights with men in relation to things such as their property and in their marriage and to children. You know, I'm just taking that and rewording it. So that's what you want to do for supports. You want to take it and reword it. Then for the explains, you're answering those specific questions, which will tie it in. It'll tie it into your argument and explain the purpose, the point of view, historical, or audience. Outside evidence, that can be anywhere. One thing I did want you to notice, I loved how this person wrote their outside evidence. Listen to how this outside evidence just flows with the writing. So in document 2, an excerpt from Women's Charter describes the demands of women want in order to achieve equality. This right here is the describes part. Then it says the document describes the lack of equal pay and ability to voting rights and property rights. This could also work for describes. This demonstrates, okay, so here she's going into supports, or he. This demonstrates a few of the many barriers women face in the legal sphere despite demanding these rights. Then look how the outside evidence just flows in with that. Like the conference described in the document, the Seneca Falls Conference held in New York was a huge milestone for women, declaring men and women to be equal. Also demonstrating just how opposed they were not having basic rights. So that's talking about a different conference, all right? But it doesn't have to be a conference. It can be any outside evidence. But I love how they like connected that in there. That's really good. Now, if you don't connect it in there, does that mean that you don't get the point? No, but that's just a good example. Okay, so let's see. Lou says, could we use a little time to submit, like 1 minute of it? I wouldn't. Well, okay, so you're saying like let it go down to 4 minutes before you submit. That would probably be okay. You will probably be able to submit in 4 minutes. Excuse me, but I would not go over 4 minutes. I wouldn't do that. Dustin was talking about the whole email thing. So it sounds like how that's going to work. If you're having problems submitting it, a thing will pop up on the screen that will give you a unique email address to send your essay to. And then you have a certain amount of time to send that essay to the email. So that's really good. You guys need to count your blessings for that, because the kids that have already taken the exam and couldn't turn it in, they don't get that option, which really sucks. They have to take it over, and that just sucks. Lana says, yeah, does it stop you at 45 minutes or can you keep writing? No. Well, so it's going to stop you at 45 minutes. No. Let's see. I think so it should stop you at 50 minutes. I think it's going to give you 50 minutes. And then when it gets to the 5 minutes, it turns red. And that's when you need to start thinking about turning it in. You can't turn it in after the timer stops. So just pay attention to your timer, Lana. It'll be very big on the screen. Rose says, can we compare things outside of the prompt parameters? For example, if the prompt said Afro-Eurasia, but you want to compare it with Americas, would that work? That's only going to work for outside evidence. You can't do that for your actual argument. Wan Ying says the College Board won. Don't know what. Oh, that's at Dustin. Okay. Jordan says, I've written about 10 DBQs and finished with 2 to 10 minutes left. Okay, then you might be missing something in those DBQs, Jordan. If you want to, you can send me one and I'll grade it and see what you're missing. Wan Ying says they send out the exam ID today. You need to log in 30 minutes before the exam begins to fill out basic information. That's correct, Wan Ying. Good job. Did everybody get their exam information? Let me know. Cloudy says you get 50. Okay, you can stop when you want. Yeah, that's true. Tammy says, Miss, I know this is off topic, but I came across a document on multiple choice quiz. And it was basically a Jewish man in India in the 12th century writing to his wife in Cairo about a divorce. How would religion play in here? Tammy, I would have to read the document because, if he's against divorce, then it would probably be because of his religion. And you could use that for point of view. If he's not against divorce, I don't know. It just would depend on the document. If you can find it, send it to me. Gary says, if you don't submit, then it doesn't take it. Exactly. Yep. You have to submit. Okay, so guys, Dream Mode says, I just joined and found your channel today when looking for sourcing. If you could go over it a bit, that would be amazing. Dreamyo, I have a whole video on it. It's called Explaining the Documents. So check that video out, and that should help you. If you need more help after that video, let me know. You can send me an email. Here's my email address. Let me put it in the comments. But that video should clear some things up for you. All right. So I think that's it for tonight. I hope that this cleared up some things and didn't make it more murky for you. I definitely think that the describes point you can get, you can definitely do the context because you're going to have your one-pagers that we made. And if you have just found my channel and you've not made the one-pagers yet, you might want to check that out. Those are the unit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 study notes or unit notes, something like that. They're recent videos that we did, I think last week, on how to make those one-pagers, and those will really, really help you with the context. So make sure you've done that because context is 1 point. Thesis, you're doing very well on thesis, so that's 2 points. If you can get that describe point, that's already 3 points. Then if you can grab those explain and outside evidence, looky there, you got 8 points already. So that's really, really, is that 8 points? Yeah, that'd be 8 points. So no, 7 points. I can't add. Oh my goodness. 7 points. It's too late to add. So 7 points is decent. And that's all without the supports. That's where most of you guys struggle. So try for the other points, especially if you're running out of time. Let's see. Gary doesn't really know. See, Tammy, it's a problem with Gary. He never really knows, right? Right, Gary? I'm getting you. I'm getting you, buddy. All right. Rachel says, Wani, you were always hungry. That's so true. Enany says, thanks so much for the live. Always appreciated. Good night, Enany. Thank you for joining in. I'm so glad that it helped. Yes, Wanying hasn't had dinner yet. Wanying says, thank you. Lou says, thank you. This really helped me a lot because I was so confused. All right. I'm so glad that it helped you. Rose says, what do you think? Maybe a 5. Rose, I have no idea. I'm hoping that a 7 to 10 will be a 5, but I don't know if they're going to be that liberal or not. Claudia says, this was probably the most useful 2 hours I've ever spent on DBQ learning. Thank you, Cloudy. That makes me feel so good about how we're helping you guys. Like I really want you all to do well. And, I have loved how this has blossomed into kind of a international, national experience. And we've gotten to make friends outside of Houston. That's been super cool. And I'm grateful that my students have allowed you all in. And it's been a blessing to me too. I really miss being in the classroom. And so having you guys around has been a lot of fun. So even if you're not technically my Houston student, I have adopted you in, and I really appreciate you all, and I want you all to know that. So thank you so much for tuning in and giving support. Dustin says, I sent you Unit 6 about 2 hours ago. Okay, Dustin, I'll check it out. I can do that tomorrow morning. Jessica says, thank you for the live. Great first time. You're so welcome, Jessica. Thanks for joining us. You're welcome anytime. Lana says, thanks, Missy. You're so welcome, Lana. Dreamio says, I watched the video, but still had a bit of trouble. I'm thinking of doing historical context. Okay, so Dreamio, if you can just email me one of your DBQs, I will look at it tomorrow. Here's my email address. And then I will give you some feedback on what you've done so far. That would probably be the easiest way. And then if you still have questions, we can go over that. Jordan says, what I meant by my previous comment was that I have done very well on my practice prompts, that I managed to have spare time. Okay, that's sweet, Jordan. That's really good. Definitely a good thing. If you do want me to look at any of them, I'm more than happy. But if your teacher has given you good feedback, that's great too. but I'm here for you if need be. I hope that you guys have spare time. It just hasn't happened for a lot of students. And even when I tried to do it, it wasn't easy. Lana, we are going to have a post-exam Zoom meeting. That reminds me, I forgot to tell you guys that. So if you are not in the remind for the YouTube and you're not in my class, then it's scrolling down on the screen, right? It's going to be scrolling here in a minute on how to join into the remind if you would like to get reminders. Because what we're going to do Friday after the test, I think at around 9:30 a.m., we're going to do a Zoom call so that we can celebrate this being over and celebrate hopefully your feelings of success, at least until we get the grades, right? Plus, I'd love to see all of your faces because I haven't met most of you in person. So if you're in my class, you don't have to join that remind. I'll send it out through the regular remind. But if you're a YouTube adopted student, then definitely get in that remind if you want to do the Zoom call with us. We're going to do it around 9:30 a.m. because we have one student that joins us from China, and that is a good time for her, and we definitely want her to be able to join in. So 9:30 a.m. on Friday, I'll send out the link. Tammy says, thank you, Miss C. So for supports, we need to pull something out, evaluate it, and argue with it. Yes, Tammy, yes. And that is difficult. That's super hard to do, but you can do it. I believe in you. Dreamio says, my teacher edited on mine, but didn't explain my sourcing too much. Okay, no problem. Send it to me. I'll check it out and see what I think. Rose says, wow, I wish I had you as a teacher. Oh, thank you, Rose. I appreciate that. But you know what? You kind of do. You kind of do because you're my adopted student now. Isabella says, Missy, can I send you more practice DBQs? Yes, send them my way. I will grade until my eyes are too tired. But I will grade them as much as I can for sure and give you as much feedback as I can. And don't forget about the live. Tomorrow at 7, we will go over last minute questions and prayer requests. Just kidding. I know a lot of you will be doing a lot of praying to whomever you believe in that you can get this DBQ. But here's the thing. I just think that you all have worked really hard, and anything that you do is better than nothing. So just do what you can do. Sana says, would it be too late to send you DBQ tomorrow? No, go ahead, Sana, send it over, and I will do my best to give you feedback. Thank you, Zara. I think that's how I say your name. That's a cool name. I like that. Thank you so much. Tammy says, I sent you a document to your email. Okay, yeah, I have several in my email that I haven't looked at yet, but I will try to get to them. 9:30 Central Time. Oh, yeah, thank you, Lana. That's a good point. So the Zoom call will be Central Time, which is 9:30 a.m. Central Time. That would be 10:30 Eastern Time. Pacific, I think it's a little bit earlier. Oh, we might not be able to do it that early because we got a lot of California peeps. Anyway, we'll work that out when it gets a little closer. I'll send it out sometime on Thursday. Let me talk to Shun and see if she can do it a little bit later for our California peeps. Gary says, you will grade till your eyes are tired. There you go. Quoting Miss Z. I like it. Yeah, my eyes get tired pretty quickly because I'm old, but I will do my best. You are getting some more, Miss Z. I love it, Gary. Keep it coming. All right, guys. Miss Z's ready for the influx. Yeah, Rachel, I graded like 55 DBQs yesterday. It was a lot, but it's cool. I love helping you guys. You guys are just lucky that I'm a nerd about this stuff. There you go, Gary. There's another quote for you. Gary says, I don't need praying. I got this. Okay. All right, Gary. Rachel says, are you sure you don't mind grading? No, I don't mind it. I'll definitely fit in as many as I can, Rachel, because on Thursday when you guys are taking the exam, that's when I'll chill. Okay. Or catch up on everything else that I need to do. Dustin says, where can I find other practice DBQs? So Dustin, all of the live DBQs on my channel, the DBQ is in the description. You can practice those first and then watch the video so you can check yourself. Jessica says, that's 7:30 for me. Okay, yeah, I thought that'd be early for California peeps. Let me talk to Shun. She might be able to do it a little bit later, and then it wouldn't be quite so early for you guys. Gary says, Rachel, you make me grade them before you give them to her. Oh, I'm sure she does. I'm sure she does. That's why they're so good, right, Rachel? Because he grades them first. Cody says, you'd be surprised on how much imposter syndrome you'll get from the results of praying. Imposter syndrome? I've never heard of that. You'll have to explain that to me. Yes, I teach AP World History, Rose. Yep, that's what I teach. I also run the library as well, so I kind of do a dual role. You're not old. 21 at best. Gary, I tell you what. I'll tell you, if you were in my actual class, Gary, you'd have an A for all the sucking up that you do. I'm just kidding. I don't give points based on that, do I, Lana? All right, Rachel says 55. Yes, baby. I was grading a ton of them. I kept track of them just because I wanted to see. Rose says, I have to go. All right, bye, Rose. Have a good night. I need to go too. Gary says, yeah, I fixed them for her. I bet you do, Gary. Dustin said, where can I find DBQs other than yours? Other than mine, you can look in, other than mine, you can like just Google DBQs and then just take out some of the documents because you're only going to have 5 documents. You can also Google AP World History College Board DBQs because they put those up online for you as well. So you can look at like the past couple of years. There's, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4. Probably, I think there's only 3. So look up AP College Board World History DBQs and there'll be some. Okay, Dustin, you've done them all. All right, sweet. You can also look in other study books. Sometimes your textbook will have some in them. So it depends on what kind of textbook you have. Rachel says, don't stroke his ego. I know, I shouldn't. All right, guys. So oh yeah, the Anti-Social Studies website has practice DBQs. Yeah, that's right. I forgot about that one. I like that one. College Board, yes. College Board definitely has some. You can also look in your AP College Board classroom or AP Classroom. I think there's some in there. All right, y'all. I am heading out of here. Tizneen says, hey, for some reason, if you can't take the exam on Thursday, we'll get another e-ticket automatically. If you can't take the exam on Thursday, I think you have to contact your AP person at your school and reapply for the July one. So make sure that you do that. Tomorrow's meeting is 7 p.m. Central. We'll be meeting back here for last minute questions. All right, y'all, I am headed out of here. Thank you so much for joining me. If you haven't subscribed yet, make sure and do so. Don't forget to give that thumbs up before you leave here because that helps the channel out a lot. And I really, really appreciate y'all being here. Know that I care about each and every one of you, and I'm glad that you're my adopted student, or some of you are in my class, but not as many of my students tune in anymore. I think they have lost motivation. So I'm glad somewhere in the world students are tuning in. Love y'all. Have a good night, and I'll see you tomorrow.